Hello BookTube, I'm Mike and this is Riff's Reading Renaissance. Today I'm going to do a tag. It's the Ray Bradbury Book Tag, which was created by my good friend Gareth at Book Songs and Other Magic, and I was tagged by the wonderful Margaret Pinard. So let me start with an admission. The only Ray Bradbury book I have read is Fahrenheit 451. However, I understand from Gareth and the tag that it's not about whether you've read all the Ray Bradbury books. The point is that he loves Ray Bradbury. In fact, I think it's one of his favorite, if not the favorite author of his. And the 10 prompts in the tag are all book titles from Bradbury's collection. And as Gareth always does so cleverly with these tags, he takes the title and creates a question for which we can answer anything, frankly, bookish from our lives. So, despite feeling completely unqualified as a Ray Bradbury expert, I did like this book, I have to say, I'm encouraged by the fact that I can still do the tag, and Margaret tagged me, for which I'm very grateful. So, let's dive straight in. The first tag is called Crime and Detective Beginnings, and it's looking for a book based around a crime. I've immediately got two thoughts here, which I'll share with you. The first is one of the most sort of big and serious books I've read since coming on BookTube, and that is, of course, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It's very much a book based around a crime, because the crime occurs in the first chapter, and we know what happened. We know who did it. So I won't tell you, but if you read the book, by chapter 2, you know who did it. And the book then is about what happens next. And it's a fascinating read. I have to say it's my preferred of the two big Dostoevsky books that everyone's supposed to read. I prefer Crime and Punishment to the Brothers Karamazov, but that's a discussion for another day. This is a wonderful book, Crime and Punishment. I would strongly recommend it to anyone who's interested in a serious consideration of human beings and what motivates them, etc. And if you're looking for a lighter read, with still based around a crime, then of course there's Agatha Christie. And you've got about 85 books to choose from. But this, of all the Agatha Christies, and I've read quite a few in my time, this is by far my favorite, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. If you know why I like this book, you know. If you've read it, you know. If you haven't read it, read it. Then you'll know why this is my favorite Agatha Christie novel. Okay, the second question in the tag is The Martian Chronicles. You're looking for a book set in another world. Now, of course, I'm well known on BookTube for not being a particularly devoted science fiction reader. But in the month of May, I have read Ursula Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, which clearly is set in another world. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this book today. I'll touch on it in my monthly reads video. And also, Gareth is also hosting a group read of a whole lot of people who are big fans of Le Guin, and they are reading her Hamish book cycle, and they've been kind enough to let me sneak in the back door for this particular book, because I'm only reading the one at this stage of my reading plan. So there's supposed to be a live chat coming up shortly. Watch Gareth's channel for news, and that'll be a chance to get a deep dive into what everybody thinks about this book. In any event, I'll talk about it at my monthly reads, so I won't dwell on it now, except to say that it's a really, really good read. And I would go further, if there's anyone out there like me who's not quite sure about where science fiction fits in their priority list, this is still a very good book to read, despite any misgivings you might have. This is not just good because it's science fiction, it's a really good book. So, having said that, let's move on to question 3, which is the book Dandelion Wine, which I think is a collection of short stories, but I'm getting out of my depth here with Bradbury, so let me not be prescriptive. The tag for Dandelion Wine says, a book that reminds you of childhood. Now here I'm going to reach back again and pull out this book called Just William by Richmal Crompton. And this is when I was a kid, which is a long time ago. I read the whole series, as many as I think there were, of Richmal Crompton's Just William. And as you can see from the little scamp on the cover here, not to mention the price, look at that, that's a real oldie English pricing. But William was just a well-meaning but entirely naughty young boy, and that was just fantastic for well-meaning, entirely naughty young boys like me to read about. This particular edition, I'm delighted to find, is it's actually a facsimile copy that I found very recently. They've re-released this paperback. It's this story, Just William, is the first ever of the William stories that were told. I don't know how many there were, but there are a lot. I don't know if they list them here by any chance. Oh gosh, yes, there are 38. Look at that. There are 38 Just William stories. I take back the fact that I said I've read most of them. I can't have read more than 10, but I probably read about 10 in my childhood. And this rather lovely back cover says Richard Crompton's Just William, a facsimile of the first edition. So when I saw this in a thrift shop the other day, it tugged at my nostalgia heart sleeves, and I thought, boy, I need to pick up a copy. So that's my choice of a book that immediately reminds me of my childhood, Richard Crompton's Just William. Question number 4. The book from Bradbury is called Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is a quotation from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. So Gareth is looking for something with a witch in it. Okay, fair enough. Now, I thought about this and I struggled a bit, but what came to my rescue is that I was listening to Ali at A Genteel Black Hole the other day, and he talked about Terry Pratchett's Weird Sisters, spelled W-Y-R-D, Weird Sisters, and said it was not only his favorite Pratchett book, if I have that right, but he would recommend that as the first Terry Pratchett book that people should read, rather than what a lot of people do, which is just get the first, which is The Colour of Magic, the first in the Discworld series. Now, again, these are all unknown territories I'm slowly looking at and deciding how far to dip my toe. But I'm a great fan of Ali and the way he looks at reading and the way he talks to us about the books he reads. And when he said Weird Sisters was what he thought would be the best entry point to Pratchett, I decided fine. So I have ordered The Weird Sisters. It's on its way. I don't have it here yet, so I'll have to put up one of these images so you know what it is. But my understanding is it is in fact Pratchett's play on the Three Witches of Macbeth. So I thought that would be appropriate for Gareth's prompt of Something Wicked This Way Comes. Number 5, the book is called Illustrated Man, and Gareth's looking for a book about or featuring your favorite illustrator. Again, I thought for a moment, and I ended up choosing a local cartoonist. I know Gareth is a huge fan of cartoonists over the ages, and here in South Africa, we have a guy called Zapiro. His real name is Jonathan Shapiro, and he styles himself, as you can see on the cover there, as Zapiro. And once a year, he puts out these annuals of all the political cartoons that he's issued through the year. And not only is he a brilliant drawer of cartoons, but he has a biting wit that is very, very, very tough. If I look at the kind of cartoons there, in the suit is the President of South Africa, and next to him is the South African rugby coach. So you will see on the back cover, you can see all the previous year annuals that he's issued. Zapiro is an absolute national treasure. In this country, it is more than ever important that someone is telling the emperor when he's got no clothes, and someone is challenging society about which bits of it don't make sense or should be subject to ridicule. So I know Gareth's a huge fan of cartoonists. This is my favorite cartoonist, and one who I think does great service in South Africa. So, prompt number 6. The book title is From the Dust Returned, and Gareth wants a book about a memorable family. So, it's not necessarily a happy family, but certainly memorable, as in the impact it made on me when I read James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. It's a dark story, and it's semi-autobiographical about Baldwin's own youth. His father was a minister in the local church, but a dark man with unresolved personal problems who didn't treat his family perhaps as he should have. And the family itself, steeped in the sort of spirituality from which the title comes, Go Tell It on the Mountain, is a reference to an old spiritual hymn. It's a very moving and very powerful book. and it's a good introduction. I believe it was James Baldwin's debut. It's the only full-length novel of Baldwin's that I've read yet, but I have read some of his short stories, including, of course, Sonny's Blues, which if you've watched my channel at all, I'm sure you've heard me talk about the story of the musician called Sonny's Blues. But suffice to say, this is a very memorable family. Not a very lovable family necessarily, but powerfully written and very moving. So that's my choice for question number 6. Question 7, Elton John's Rocket Man, and it says here, inspired by Ray. So I'm obviously a music fan like Gareth is, and I know Elton John's Rocket Man very well. I grew up with it. So given that Elton John wrote Rocket Man with Bernie Taupin, who wrote the lyrics, inspired by Ray Bradbury, Gareth's looking for us to talk about a song that was inspired by a book or a story. And here I'm going to unfortunately not be able to limit myself to one. I'm going to take 2 again, because there are 2 albums of music that are based on famous literary works, both of which were seminal to my growing up and discovering quite how powerful music could be. The first is Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. And this book, which is obviously well known and as a classic, was an inspiration to the progressive rock artist Rick Wakeman, who recorded an album called Journey to the Center of the Earth with a massive orchestra and a total 1970s over-the-top prog approach to this album. But as a young kid growing up and listening to the power of that music, listening to powerful rock music played by a symphony orchestra, the walls of my imagination just collapsed, and it was a very, very special moment. And I have always had a huge fondness for Rick Wakeman's Journey to the Center of the Earth, with a nod to Jules Verne. And another version of the same degree of enthusiasm is for H.G. Wells's book The War of the Worlds, which is an equally well-known classic, and again around about the 70s, where it was quite trendy for rock musicians to take inspiration from books. Jeff Wayne took H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds and produced a rock opera basically called The War of the Worlds. And the piece de resistance, in case I wasn't already sold, is the narrator he used for the narrator bits of the story was Richard Burton. Burton than moi. So those are my 2 choices. Sorry if I'm jamming 2 into one prompt, but Journey to the Center of the Earth and The War of the Worlds, musical versions by Rick Wakeman and Jeff Wayne, cannot be beaten for sheer power. This was before the trend of what was called classic rock, where a whole subgenre emerged with the London Symphony Orchestra playing all the hits from Bohemian Rhapsody, etc. This was before that. But these 2, if you haven't heard these 2, go back and have a listen. You'll probably find them easily these days on Spotify. Have a listen, because I'd be very surprised if they don't bring a smile to your face. Moving on to number 8, where the book prompted is We'll Always Have Paris. So we're looking, therefore, for a book set in Europe. I had to think for a little bit as to what to choose here, and I ended up choosing this slim volume that I read quite recently called A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. It's a really charming book. Let me read from the back cover so that I don't misremember any of the detail. A damaged survivor of the First World War, Tom Birkin finds refuge in the village church of Oxgodby, where he is to spend the summer uncovering a huge medieval wall painting. Immersed in the peace and beauty of the countryside and the unchanging rhythms of village life, he experiences a sense of renewal and belief in the future. Now an old man, Birkin looks back at that idyllic summer of 1920, remembering a vanished place of blissful calm, untouched by change, a precious moment he has carried with him through the disappointments of the years. And if that premise doesn't persuade you, it's a tiny little book. It's 102 pages. It really is a beautiful, heartwarming, one of those books that just makes you feel a little bit happier about life. I happen to know that the author Richard Osman has cited this book as his favorite book of all time. Make of that what you will, but there it is. I just found this a heartwarming book, but not sentimental or soppy, just a genuinely uplifting book that made you feel glad that you'd read it. So, number 9. The book that Gareth cites is called Skeleton Story, and he wants a book that contains a plot with body horror or feeling of being trapped. Those are difficult for me because I'm not a big fan of horror, and I read very little horror indeed. But I did apply a little bit of lateral thinking, and I thought a brilliant book about horror and body horror is the book I've just finished reading recently, which is an autobiographical book by Christopher Hitchens, the famous atheist, called Mortality, which he wrote after being given a terminal diagnosis of esophageal cancer, from which he did eventually die. It's a very powerful book, again, a very slim volume. It's about 96 pages. It basically tracks his life from the moment of the diagnosis until the end, and it's a deeply moving book. I have nothing but respect for this guy. There was a lot of pressure on him to, renege and suddenly find religion as he faced the tough times at the end. None of that happened. He was steadfast and consistent to the end, and it's a very moving, very powerful book. So that's my rather slightly different choice for a book containing body horror. As someone who has personally had the fight with cancer, and I've been a little luckier than Christopher Hitchens was, I will say it's an extremely life-changing moment when you realize that your own body is no longer working on your side of the argument. It may now be working against you. That's a sobering moment that changes your outlook. And I think that is recognized in this book. Hitchens realizes that he and his body are no longer on the same team. And that's a very moving book. It's not a depressing book. I did not find it depressing. I found it powerful and moving, and it enhanced my thought of Christopher Hitchens even further. And the last and final tag is number 10, Marionettes Incorporated. Here we're looking for a book with robots or a doppelganger in it. Now again, I don't have a lot of books with robots because of my limited science fiction type of reading. I do think there's a Philip K. Dick in there somewhere waiting for me, but I haven't got to it yet. But then I thought, wait a minute. Again, if we cast my mind back to my earlier years as a reader, long before BookTube, there was a great book I read with a doppelganger story, and that was Anthony Hope's The Prisoner of Zenda. It's a story of the main character, one Rudolf Ressendil, in the country of Ruritania. There are 3 books set in Ruritania by Anthony Hope, but the premise of it is that this protagonist goes to Ruritania and is totally shocked when he suddenly realizes that the monarch, king of Ruritania, is the splitting image of himself. And I'm not going to tell you more about the book because I don't want to spoil it, and it has been a while since I read it, so I might have plot details slightly wrong if I delve too deep into the realms of my memory. But I do remember as a youngster reading it and thinking, wow, this is a swashbuckling, rollicking adventure, almost in the league of, the Count of Monte Cristo and the Three Musketeers and that kind of thing. So that's my rather, again, obscure choice for a book that I can't do the robots, but I can do the doppelganger. So that's the one I'm choosing. And finally, as always with these tags, there's an entreaty to tag others, and I'm always notoriously bad at coming up with names. So I thought I'd do what I've been doing a little bit recently, that first of all, it goes without saying that if you see this tag and you'd like to do it, please do it. I mean, don't wait for an invitation. We're not that sort of formal in BookTube. But more specifically, if you're waiting to be tagged, and I know people like being personally tagged, so let me say that if you are currently sitting with fewer than 250 subscribers on your account, then I am personally tagging you to do this tag. And do not be put off if you're not a Ray Bradbury knowledgeable or even a fan. I've read, as I said, one of his books, but that has not stopped me having enormous fun with this wonderful tag. Gareth is one of the most creative booktubers when it comes to creating wonderful tags out of the most obscure inspirations, and they're great, great, great fun to do. So give it a go if you feel so inclined. And for those who've been watching with me, thank you so much for walking the journey with me as always. I appeal to you again, as I always do. Please like, subscribe. If you're feeling very generous, leave a comment. I suggest, if it's not cheeky, to ring the notification bell, simply because my posting schedule is of necessity erratic these days with work pressure. And that's really all I have for you in this tag, and therefore thank you again for watching, and until we meet again on BookTube, bye bye now.